A Song Can Change Your Life is made possible by a grant from the Fulton County Virtual Arts Initiative. Recognizing the therapeutic value of the arts and the need to support the creative community during the COVID pandemic, the Fulton County Virtual Arts Initiative offers operational support to enhance the arts sector's ability to present virtual arts programs and creative engagement opportunities for Fulton County residents and visitors. A Song Can Change Your Life is recorded in the Black Box at the Alpharetta Arts Center, located at 238 Canton Street, Alpharetta. To learn more about programs and events at the Alpharetta Arts Center, go to alpharetta.ga.us and search Arts Center, or click the link located on our website, asongcanchangeyourlife.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to A Song Can Change Your Life, where we talk with one songwriter one-on-one about one of their songs. My name is James, and we're here today outside the incredible Alpharetta Arts Center in downtown Alpharetta, Georgia. My special guest today is Tony Arata. He's a Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame member and wrote the iconic hit, The Dance for Garth Brooks. He's also had number ones by Leroy Parnell, Clay Walker, Patty Loveless. He's had cuts by Emmylou Harris and Bonnie Raitt, and on and on and on. To me, he's the gold standard of songwriting. Today, Tony and I sit down and we talk about his number one hit, Here I Am, for Patty Loveless. But before we do that, I wanted Tony to play a couple songs for you. So let's go inside the Black Box here at the Alpharetta Arts Center and hear the one and only Tony Arata.
Thank you very much for having me here, Jimmy. I appreciate it very much. It's great to be anywhere right now. So glad to be with y'all. A few days ago, 2 days ago to be specific, was my mama's birthday, or would have been. And there's no way in the world I would have ever amounted to anything had it not been for the belief that my mama had in me, and anybody that knows me knew Virginia and can attest to that. But she was always a fan of my music, and so I think this is the most appropriate one to start with. She was born and raised right not very far from here over in LaGrange, Georgia. I've climbed mountains that I thought I'd never climb. I've had my moments in the sun from time to time. Fellow travelers, I know I've helped a few. I guess I've done the best that I can do. But the one thing that I had no hand in doing will always be the finest thing that I've ever done. No gift I give, just one forever given to me. It was a day that I was born, my mother's son. I learned to stand up tall, standing there beside her. She never bent, no matter how this world denied her. And I learned how to handle storms that come by the grace of being born, my mother's son. And how I depended on knowing in her eyes that I could do no wrong. Oh, but the one thing that I had no hand in doing to this very day is the finest thing that I've ever done. No gift I gave, just one forever given to me. It was the day that I was born, my mother's son. You're the one thing that I had no hand in doing will always be the finest thing that I've ever done. no gift I gave, just one forever given to me. It was the day that I was born, my mother's son. And if Virginia were here today, she would tell you that was the greatest song ever written, because she thought everything I wrote was the greatest song ever written. Turned out not to be the case, but we can't go against our moms. But I married a young lady who was also the greatest inspiration to me ever making it to Nashville and to ever having any type of career in the music business. She believed in me and actually got us to Nashville herself. Gave away our apartment where we lived in Thunderbolt, Georgia, and we moved to Nashville. And we had only been there. We got there in late October of 1986, and there were a handful of songs that I came with, and a handful of songs that I wrote right after we got there. And one of them was this one. This is probably the second song I wrote after we got to town. I didn't write that on this guitar. I wrote this on my wife's little Conrad. It's about a $50 guitar with gut strings. It only had 5 strings at the time and didn't have a strap peg or anything. So I wrote this kind of standing up on and propping it up on an ironing board, and which goes to prove one thing above all else, that if it's not about the gear, it's about what you do with it. I got very lucky on that day and wrote this song that for anybody that's out there that's listening and that may be wanting to go into songwriting, this song was turned down by everybody and their brother for 3 years after the day I wrote it. And wound up doing an early show with a young man who had moved to Nashville about the same time we did. He had moved there from Oklahoma, us from South Georgia, and his name was Garth Brooks. Did an early show with him, and he heard this song that day and said if he ever got a record deal, he would love to do it. And he did, and he did. And more than anything else under the sun, I can tell you this, will always be grateful that it was a songwriter who recorded the song. It's called The Dance. Looking back on the memory of the dance we shared beneath the stars above, when for a moment all the world was right. How could I have known that you'd ever say goodbye? And now I'm glad I didn't know the way it all would end and the way it all would go. Our lives are better left to chance. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. Holding you, now I held everything, and for a moment there was another king. But if I'd only known how this king would fall, hey, now who's to say? You know I might have changed it all. So now I'm glad I didn't know the way it all would end and the way it all would go. Our lives are better left to chance. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. Our lives to chance, I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. My thanks to my Jamie for that one.
Tony Arata, my friend.
How you, Jimmy?
Welcome to A Song Can Change Your Life. Welcome back to Alpharetta, man. It's so great to see you.
Well, when I knocked on the door back there and you opened it, I went, well, I'm home. This is great.
Man.
It was just so good to see you.
It's been such a crazy year, and getting to interact with you like we do most years, playing music together, is always a highlight of the year. And with that gone, man, I've really missed you.
I've missed you too, and I've missed everybody. I mean, it was just to be around the whole Home by Dark family, and it was just great.
Well, absence makes the heart grow fonder, I guess.
I hope.
But I wanted to start today by telling our audience a story that to me encapsulates this idea that a song can change your life. That's not just a phrase, that there really is some power to it. And here's one example in my life was almost exactly 2 years. It was November, I guess, of 2018. Garth Brooks did the first ever concert in Notre Dame Stadium at the University of Notre Dame, where I went to grad school. And that university means a ton to me. I'm very fond of it. And you facilitated tickets for my wife and I to go see him. And so we went up to South Bend, and there's 80,000+ people in the stadium. It's snowing, it's cold. NBC is there to film a Christmas special with Garth. There's amazing energy in the whole place. And I felt so lucky to be there because it sold out in like 5 minutes. And you were kind enough to look out after us and facilitate those tickets. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm blown away by Garth. It was the first time I'd ever seen him. And truly, if anybody who is interested at all, even whether they care about country music or not, just how to see somebody take control of a crowd, go see Garth Brooks. It's an amazing thing. So he does a show. I'm blown away. The atmosphere is amazing. I feel so grateful to be there. And the last song he plays with his band in that crowd was The Dance, which you wrote. And so on the second or third chorus, the band stops playing, Garth stops singing, and 80,000+ people sing your words. And I'm in this historic place, in this time in my life, hearing those words written by my friend, sitting in seats that were facilitated by my friend, and I'm hearing men and women, young, old, black, white, Hispanic, singing your words. It was an overpowering thing to me on many, many levels. It was that relationship I had with you and the university, the setting and the connection. But also, even if I didn't have that, just to witness, to be in that space, when you hear 80,000+ people sing, it's an overpowering thing. And to be connected to that song it just hit me so strong. And it changed me. And it was an amazing experience. And I want to thank you for that. If you were to end our friendship for some reason today, I would be heartbroken, but I would look back on that moment as forever grateful that you helped put that together for me, because it really did change me.
Well, Jimmy, it's so kind to tell me that, and I'm so glad y'all had a good time. I don't think the weather was particularly cooperative.
It didn't matter.
No, I don't think it. No, usually it doesn't with him. But I appreciate most of all you telling me that with how big the crowd was. I mean, that song, as I mentioned earlier, was written in the laundry room of our old apartment there in Nashville, Tennessee, and on my wife's old guitar, my wife Jamie's old guitar. And you have no idea, I mean, how did it get from there to where you heard it?
Yeah.
And so many things had to fall into place for that to happen. And I've joked about it many times. I said, if it were as easy as just doing that, then you'd do it every Thursday.
Sure.
But it just doesn't work like that. And I guess I have to say this, I didn't set out to accomplish that. I didn't set out to say, Here's one that somebody's going to be singing in the stadiums, 25, 30 years down the road. You just write the best song you can at the time.
Sure.
And it met with resistance after the fact, even after Garth liked it. And so it was just one of those things that was meant to be. The gentleman who wound up producing it was also a songwriter. Alan Reynolds is one of the, everybody in Nashville calls him Yoda. He's the guy that everybody worships what they think about whatever their work is. If Alan likes it, it's good. So it was produced by a songwriter. It was sung by a songwriter. That's how I met Garth.
Yeah.
At an open mic show back in '86.
It has a sense of divine providence to it, doesn't it? Because it was so uncalculated.
Yeah.
And I'm sure my story, I'm sure there's similar stories to mine for different connections throughout your life, and but it's a mysterious thing. Something from nothing, an idea is generated. This is the whole idea of a song can change your life. An idea hits a songwriter wherever he is, and he transforms this emotion and thought into pen and paper and melody, and then it just this stuff happens.
Well, and oddly enough, the song is about letting life play out as it will. That's the only way you get the true essence of a life, is to just let it. You have to take the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have to just let it play out. And so it's about fate and about how if you change one thing, you're going to change everything. And then you take the song specifically and you remove the guy who sang it, the guy who envisioned the video, which was the same guy, the people who played on the song, who did that wonderful piano intro, the gentleman who produced it.
Right.
You take any one of those elements out of it, and we might not be sitting here having this conversation at all. Yeah. And so, and none of that I had any say in. It was it happened.
Yeah.
That and that young lady that I mentioned, my sweet mama, who when we moved to Nashville, I joked with people. She was a devout Catholic. She went to St. Michael's there on Tybee Island, where I grew up, every day. And when Jamie and I left for Nashville, she went down there every day and lit candles. And it got so prevalent in her life that one of the sisters finally asked her and said, "Virginia, is everybody okay at home?" And she said, "Yes, sister, you're very kind to ask." And she didn't want to tell the sister that she was praying for a little boy to have a hit, in Nashville, because it didn't seem the right place to do that, but to be thinking of oneself or one's children. But, so who knows? That could have played as much a part in it as anything.
Man, who knows? But, yeah, it was a powerful moment for me, and it's interesting to hear you talk about, like, the treatment of a song once it gets on recorded, etc. But the part of that moment that moved me was when the band wasn't even playing and Garth wasn't even playing. It was the guy next to me that I didn't know from Adam. I did want to go backwards a little bit with you. You grew up on Tybee Island, is that right? So what's life like for a kid growing up on Tybee Island?
Well, I spent what I call my formative years here. I mean, I was in high school in Tybee. I was born in Savannah, Georgia, and then my folks and I and members of my family moved away for a while. And then when we moved back to Tybee, it was just me and my mom and daddy. And so I went to school 30 miles inland from Tybee in a place called Thunderbolt, Georgia. And Tybee was a great place to grow up. I mean, it was Savannah Beach when I was a kid growing up, and then they eventually changed the name to Tybee. But it was like, the only way I can describe it is it's like any small town in America. It just happens to be right on the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
And it truly is an island. There's one way on, one way off, and that's it. And if you are a Tybeenian, The bar for what you can get in trouble doing is really high. I mean, you can get away with almost anything there. And I did a thing. They had a thing there called the Tybee Island Songwriters Festival about a year ago. A good friend by the name of Sean Squires put it all together. And I was relating that story. I mean, where I played, the Post Theater was not even there. It was completely dilapidated when I grew up there as a kid. Mm-hmm. And then to come back and see it completely put back in use. And it's like any other small town insofar as everybody's, they look after each other. But it also has that hidden jewel that only a place that's, like I said, it's got its chin stuck out every day into the ocean. Yeah. That they kind of look at life differently. And if you make it through hurricane season, then we'll fix that dock next year. Sure. If we make it. And then when hurricane season passes, they just go, oh, we'll get it next year. So it's got a very laid back, very laid back.
And that's interesting because as long as I've known you, you've got that vibe. You don't seem to be stressed out.
Well, it was. I mean, it's such a great place for a kid to grow up. I mean, my gosh, clothes are optional down there, and so if you got a pair of bathing trunks and some flip flops, you're
good.
You're formal. That's a formal. And but I had a great time growing up down there, and then of course you going into high school. The young lady that I wound up marrying was from an island not far from there called Wilmington Island. It wasn't quite the bohemian place that Tybee was, but Savannah's such a beautiful coastal town, and I grew up playing on River Street, and so.
When did you start playing music? Was it in high school or?
Yeah, when we moved from Columbia, South Carolina, I was in the 9th grade, I guess. And it dawned on me I was never going to be a professional baseball player. That just wasn't in the cards. And my brother gave me his old guitar. And I said, well, maybe I can do something with this piece of wood, because I sure as heck can't do anything with it.
Did you have any interest in music before he gave it to you?
Well, I mean, I grew up with older siblings, so I grew up with all their album collections. And so I was exposed to music my whole life. Plus the fact I was the last child. And my folks were a lot older than me. I mean, they were very old when they had me, rather, and they were from the big band era. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then my sisters, of course, were all into the English Invasion, and then my brother was very big into R&B, so I was exposed to it. But I never considered it as a livelihood. Certainly, I enjoyed music like everybody else does, but I think. Because I didn't have a lot of friends growing up down there on Tybee.
Why is that?
Well, it's just the high school I went to was in town, so gotcha. I didn't really go to and it was a very small. I mean, I think there's only at the time there were only 800 people that lived out on Tybee full, around the clock. And I spent the first summer we were there. As I said, with my older siblings' album catalogs that they had abandoned over the years. And I think I had an epiphany that summer going into the 11th grade. And it hit me that these songs I was listening to weren't necessarily written by the person that was singing them. I mean, if you were listening to James Taylor, it could have been a Carole King song. Mm-hmm. Or if you were listening to Aretha Franklin, it was probably an Otis Redding song. Mm-hmm. And so for whatever reason, a light went off that, they had to come from somewhere. Somebody's singing them, but somebody had to write them. And then you start digging back through my folks' old catalogs. And, of course, you got Johnny Mercer and that whole ilk that wrote, Mercer and Mancini that wrote everything. Sinatra was doing.
That's pretty insightful, though, for a high school junior that because you didn't come up from a musical family, did you?
No, my father was a great singer. He grew up in a boys' home in Cincinnati, and he was always they had a great choir there. And my father, my father Howard H.P. Was a trip, and I can't remember how many times I would come home late from playing at the Novelty Bar down on Tybee. I'd crawl in at about 2:30 in the morning, and 5:30, the blinds in my room would fly open, and Howard would start singing. My dad would start singing, some big Episcopal church hymn or something, bright in the corner where you are at the top of his lungs. And my mother's of Irish descent, and she grew up. All her clan played one thing or the other, not professionally. There were no professional musicians in my family, and no professional. My mother begged me to take piano lessons, which I wish I had done, but I never did. But it was not. It was kind of just a slow burn, and I painted my folks' house. My dad said he'd give me $60 that I knew there was a guitar at Schroeder's Music in town, and it was a guitar and an amp and a cord, and that you could get for $60.
Quality.
Yeah, and so I said, and I was telling my dad about it, and he said, "Well, all right, you paint the house, and I'll help you with the guitar," and. So that's how smart you are when you're 16 years old. You go, that's a pretty good return on investment.
I'm in.
I'm going to paint this house in the blazing Georgia heat for the next 3 months. But I still have the sales receipt.
Really?
Yeah, my mama drove me down, and it's her beautiful penmanship on the check that she signed and bought me that guitar from Schroeder's, and that was both the beginning and the beginning of probably, of my undoing. I mean, I never came out of the room after that.
This was high school?
It was high school.
Yeah.
And so I had an old turntable that my brother had left, and I would just spin records and play along with them, or what I thought was playing along with them. And then started noodling on trying to write songs. And there's not a songwriter alive who would ever say that, my first ones were the best. That's just not the case. And thank God those usually get lost in one move or the other.
Yeah.
But I started writing and wrote all through high school, all through college, and wound up when I finally went to college at Georgia Southern College at the time, not university. I was playing with a friend somebody I befriended by the name of Danny Smith. And Danny and I formed a little duo and played, the beer joints and everything like that. And we played as many original music, as many original songs as we thought we could get away with. And what really was probably the nail in my coffin was the fact that people would come in, regularly, and then they'd request that song, like a song you had written, and then you make the further connection that, hey, somebody remembers something I wrote.
Yeah.
That's really neat. And so I just started writing in earnest probably my sophomore year of college. And then when I graduated college, I knew my wife, Jamie. I mean, we were friends. We both went to the same high school, Johnson High there in Thunderbolt. But we were just friends. But the day after I graduated from Georgia Southern, she showed up at my folks' house on Tybee. She and a friend were actually coming by to visit my mom, and I opened the door and I went, man, why have you never asked this sweet gal out? And of course, I was no catch, but what the heck, that's the other beauty about being young is you're fearless.
That's right.
So I called her, and that was June 27th of 1980, and we've been together ever since.
Wow.
That was in 84 when we married. And in 86,
you went to Nashville in 86, right?
Yeah, that was the year that Jamie had finally had enough of, because I wrote all the time.
Now, were you playing? Did I read a story once? you were playing clubs and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So you were playing up in Atlanta.
I was playing in Atlanta.
And that's where someone from, was it Noble Vision
Noble
Records?
Vision Records, right.
Yeah. So they actually signed you, right? To a deal or something?
Well, yeah, they did. They were the only ones that knew that I had a record deal. But anyway, that's a great point, though, Jimmy, because there were people in my life that I think thought you need to pursue the artist thing. Why, I don't know, but they did. And I never once had any interest in it at all. All I ever wanted to do was write songs.
Wow.
And of course, I'm very blessed to get to go out and play some of those songs, but I never had any preconceptions about, you're the artist.
It's more about creating the art and handing it off.
Right, and just the anonymity that comes with being a songwriter is just a beautiful thing. You don't have to ride on the buses or in the vans anymore. You get to stay at home. You get to lead a very normal life, and you get to, be utterly nondescript, other than the fact that if you get lucky enough to have something on the radio, you can take pride in that. But nobody knows to this day. It's like, I didn't know you wrote that.
But you got signed to this deal, Noble Vision Records. I never heard of them either. But you create a record and you put it out, and it got distributed pretty widely. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it was there again. It's just one of those things you just can't make up. So it had to have happened, this was before we moved to Nashville. I played with my band in Atlanta, and this gentleman came out, and he said he was working with this artist by the name of Jim Glaser. Yeah. And I knew of Glaser because of the Glaser brothers were the background vocals for, Marty Robbins, and then they had records out of their own. They were doing when the day I met him, or the time I met him, they had a song out called "Loving Her Was Easier Than Anything I'll Ever Do Again." The Glaser brothers did. It was about that same time, and that was a Chris Christopherson song. Again, somebody else wrote what somebody else was doing. And I don't know, I wound up submitting, he gave me an address, and I sent some songs. And the next thing I know, he said, yeah, we're going to do 3 of these on Jim's first solo record.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
one of them was the title track, Man in the Mirror.
Yeah.
Funny, years later, when Michael Jackson recorded a song of the same name, and everybody I knew thought that was my song.
Tony Arata, right? Oh man,
people were calling me, hey,
congratulations.
Yeah, that's great, man. We're thinking about buying this house over here. Can you spot me a few? That was just one of those things that I didn't go out in pursuit of. It just happened, and Jim was one of the greatest singers that ever drew breath. And again, we were talking earlier about how great singers just get better with time, and that was certainly the case with Jim. And I was so grateful to have those songs recorded. And then Jim got signed to MCA Records, and because I was part of the fold, I got signed to MCA Records, and that started a whole nother ball of wax. It's like I didn't, like I said, nobody knew I was on MCA, but
I did.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I did my research.
That's great. Thank you, Jimmy. But there again, I just was I remember going and recording that record, and I met some lifelong friends that played on that record, and they wound up doing songs of mine later as producers. Mm-hmm. But when I met them at the time, I literally was embarrassed. I was like, I haven't done anything to earn being in the, I don't deserve being in the same room with James Stroud playing the drums or Don Potter playing the guitar. I just, I knew them. I knew what they had played on. I knew who they were, and I knew what they had done, and they were just hired guns for me. They'd have played for anybody.
Yeah, it's very helpful.
But that wasn't at all what I wanted to do, and thankfully that all went asunder. And of course, we waited till everything fell apart before we moved to Nashville. So all the connections were lost, and which was probably, in retrospect, the greatest thing that could have happened. I wound up going to the open mic, the Sunday Night Writer show. You have to audition for it, the Bluebird.
Yeah, did it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you have to audition.
Yep.
And I played, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. Amy Curlin, the owner of the Bluebird, was sitting there, and her dear friend, Janice Ian.
Wow.
So you're playing, this is who you're playing
Wow.
for. And, you know, I finished my little thing, my little audition, and I go back, and Amy goes, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she held up my MCA record, and she said,
wow.
"You don't have to audition for this." She said, "What are you doing here?"
Wow.
And I said, "No, if you don't mind," I said, "I'm starting over." And she went, "Fair enough." And she gave me a date. And I went back and did the Sunday Night Writer show and started from where everybody else starts,
Wow, Tony.
as it should be.
Yeah.
And so so I just started over as a songwriter.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction to, you know.
Well, that's consistent with my impression of you, and always has been. You're an extremely humble guy, and I would never perceive you to be one that says, "Hey, I deserve to just to go past this in the line."
Sure.
You've always been humble, and but I'm not sure I would have been that humble. I might say, "Yeah, I'll skip it. I'll take a extra."
Well,
but I'm impressed by that. That's pretty cool.
No, well, it was legitimate. It was the fact that I wanted, if I was going to earn any reputation in Nashville, I wanted it to be as a songwriter, and not as anything else. And I knew what I was up against, even having that pipe dream, which was insane.
Right.
I mean, when I moved there, I'll be telling you some people who were very prominent at the time who, you go, you're in good company. They really need you, pal. Thank God you're here.
We need more songwriters.
Yeah, we need more songwriters because we don't have enough with Bobby Braddock and Harlan Howard over here. We just, we're running a little short. But there again.
But that's 80. That's 86.
86.
86, and so you're in town and you're just trying to figure it out like everybody else, trying to play open mics and make connections and write songs. But Tony, 4 years later, The Dance comes out. Only 4 years. I mean, how does that happen? I mean, that connection with Garth when he's young and coming up through is a magical connection. But outside looking in, Nashville's known as a 10-year town, but 86 you're in there and you're at the Sunday Night Bluebird thing, and then 4 years later, this massive thing happens with this song. How did you react to that? Did you have to get by yourself and kind of process what was happening or what was going on?
That's probably the greatest part about it all is the. So I did mention that I went to Georgia Southern because as sure as I was unknown to the MCA stable, I probably was unknown to the fact that I actually went to Georgia Southern because I never went to class. And so when they handed me a diploma, it was, wow.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dad. But anyway, so my degree was in journalism. Mm-hmm. And but I didn't learn anything about journalism or writing or constructing a sentence or anything in college. It was only so when I got out, I had a degree, but I didn't know how to do anything. So when we moved to Nashville, Jamie, my beloved, was the brains of the outfit. She got us there and she kept us there and she kept the lights on. And she has an MBA. She went to work, got a job, and used her brains and worked, harder than anybody I've ever known. And I used my skill set, which was lifting heavy things, having played in bands, and I went to work for UPS, loading trucks. And I'd go in early and I'd write articles for their company magazine so that I could build up a portfolio, which I did not ever earn in the 4 years of college. So I wound up getting all these human interest stories and then I'd go load trucks, and then I'd go home and I'd type them up and I'd submit them to the Big Idea, which is their magazine. So I wound up getting a bunch of articles printed, and then I had a byline. It's like it says your name and here's the story, and it's actually printed.
I really can, right?
Yeah. And so I used that and got my first job behind a desk, actually working in journalism. I went to work for a trade publication there in Nashville, and the whole reason for this long story is the fact that you ask what it's like 4 years after the dance, and then it's, So here's how worlds collide. The trade magazine dealt with buses, and so I was literally, and I was I had worked my way up to being assistant editor of this thing called the Bus Operator magazine. I didn't know any, I'd loaded trucks.
The
I figured
Operator magazine?
Bus Operator.
Bus Operator.
Yeah, and they were with a huge association out of Washington, D.C. called the American Bus Association. So we were printing all their stuff. And I'd worked my way up to being an assistant editor or something. I was doing an interview. Now, you want to talk about how worlds collide and what's it really like and how do you process this? All right, here's how you process it. I'm on the phone, and I still remember his name. The guy's name was Chuck Garcia. He was head of R&D or something with Detroit Diesel Allison. And they were introducing a new motor for, I don't know if it was for Eagle or for Prevost or whatever they were sticking these engines in and transmissions. So I'm doing an interview with him. And the phone rings, the other line rings, and the young lady who was the receptionist said, it's somebody from the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. And so I put Chuck on hold, and I go, hello, and it's the head of NARAS, and they're telling me that the dance has been nominated for a Grammy, and it'll be held in New York. And I'm like, that's fantastic. I'm going to have to call you back. And so I went to the other line and finished my interview with Chuck Garcia of Detroit Diesel. And so when Jamie and I, so the song had gone on and had done all this, but I was still working. I was still working on my bus thing, and worked for years after that, after the dance, and after a lot of these other songs we'll talk about. I mean, there again, to anybody who ever considered wanting to be a songwriter, the greatest bit of advice I could ever give them would be find some way to pay the bills, and you're going to meet a lot of other people in other lines of work that you're not going to meet at the coffee pot with a bunch of other songwriters.
Yeah, right.
And that's, in essence, what you're supposed to be doing is reporting on real life.
Yeah.
And most of the songwriters I know make up real life, not necessarily live it, they just make it up.
Yeah.
And so I've made lifelong friends working for this company that had absolutely nothing to do with music whatsoever.
Wow.
And so it was a great lesson for me to tell people there is no lifestyle you have to lead. There's no persona you have to adopt. There is, if you're paying your bills, you get to stay in Nashville longer. Is the only way I look at it.
Yeah.
If you can pay the electric bill, NES doesn't care where the money comes from.
So, but that when that hits though in 1990 with Garth, does that were you with your publishing company at that point? Or not?
Well, no, I still, the publishing, I didn't have a publishing company at the time. I was still writing for a company there in Nashville.
Okay.
And they controlled all the publishing and still do for at least one more year. And then copyright laws, that's a long story, but they'll all be reverting back. A lot of them will be reverting back.
But you hit that in 90. I'm curious as to know, that had to have opened up some doors now where people are looking at other songs within your catalog, et cetera, to where
you would think.
Easier, maybe?
You would think. But the way I describe it is they were just a little slower to say no, because a lot of people missed the dance. I mean, it had been turned down by everybody.
Yeah.
So they were a little less quick to just outright reject your song. But I've said it 1,000 times, and I'll say it one more time. I'd have the same number of songs if with or without any of the success or accolades or chart positions that I've had, because that's what if you write songs, that's what you do.
So get me from, that's around 1990. So the song I want to talk about today, A Song Can Change Your Life, and this one we're about to talk about has changed mine. I know it's changed yours, changed Patty Loveless's life, and lots of people. And there's another Notre Dame connection I'll tell you about in a second with it. But is this Here I Am, which went number one for Patty Loveless. I'd like to know where that song came from, sort of the idea behind it, and then how it got cut. That came out in 94.
Right.
Yeah, and I think November, again, of 94. Interestingly enough, that was my first year at Notre Dame. And I wasn't a country music fan, but I remember that song, and I remember that might have been my first introduction to Patty, was hearing her voice going, wow, that's cool. And I remember thinking, boy, that's a really well-written song.
Well, and there again, as I said, I went to see Kevin, and I came home and sat down in that little room before I went to UPS, and down there in the laundry room, and wrote. That song was written very quickly, and I met immediate resistance because the chorus changes.
Every chorus is different a little bit, yeah.
And the bridge, they said, nobody writes a bridge that long. And so it was just immediate resistance, but I figured I was on to something because, that was written not long after the dance. But it took 7 years for Patty to do it. And so 87
wow.
to 94, yeah. And it was turned down again and again and again. And an interesting aside about that song is I value and I'm very grateful, eternally grateful to the great artists that have taken a chance and have done some of my songs over the years. But the greatest gift of all to me was getting to know them as people and getting to call them friends. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm very grateful for all that Garth made possible, but I value. I love him. And Tricia. They're special in their own right, not because they're artists. Right. I can't think of them like
right.
that. And the same with Patty. I got to know Emery, her husband, Emery Gordy, and one of the greatest producers.
Emery,
ever.
for our people who don't know, worked with Elvis and
that guy, yeah, and with Emmylou Harris. And great musician, great string arranger, great songwriter, just phenomenal guy. But, he told me in later years, he said, the crazy part about it is we never cut that as a single. I mean, when you do an album, we go, all right, we've got our 3 singles. And then you've got the other songs that make up the album, but you don't ever consider them being a hit. There's no background vocals on Here I Am. Mm-hmm. And it's very sparse. And it was meant to be an album cut, and it wound up being a very big song for Patty, just because it somehow made a connection with people. And number one, her delivery of it is phenomenal.
It's a great delivery. Tell me though because it's a song I interpret it as, it's like, it's love, attraction for someone that won't give up.
Oh no, and that's funny that you mentioned that, because earlier when I talked about the anonymity of being a songwriter, I really do remember being in a convenience store, and these ladies in front of me. This song was big at the time. Here I Am was, and it was on the radio or on the Muzak, whatever it was. It was playing in the store. And I'm just standing there, and they're talking about the song, and they love Patty. But they said, she shouldn't have taken him back, And so they're mad that at the end of the song,
no
at the
matter
end
what
of the
this guy
song,
did.
it's like, I don't care what you've done, I still love you.
That's right.
And they were just furious about that. And I remember just standing there going, hey.
That's great.
Because they didn't know who had written it, you were safe just to listen in on the conversation.
It is a surprise ending, sort of, when if you don't know the song and you're reading through it and you're listening through it, and then that last verse and chorus, all right, coming out of the bridge, and honey, I got over you passing me over a long time ago, and my pride was stronger when I was younger. Now I'd rather have you to know that here I am. I still carry a flame for you, burning me like a brand. Here I am.
Yeah. Well, and it's just one of those moments where you just were listening when you actually said something you did need to write down or you did need to remember, and that song has meant so much to me. And you think about this. I mean, I wrote it in '87. Wrote on this guitar right here, my old Alvarez, which is the only guitar I had when we moved to Nashville outside of Jamie's old guitar. And then you fast forward how many years? I don't even know. Sitting at a venue here in Atlanta.
In Alpharetta.
Yeah.
2015, you and I are playing together with our Home by Dark live show. And Patty
and Emery
come to the show, and Patty comes up with Emery and sings "Here I Am" with you next to me. I'm sitting next to you, and Patty's there. I never met Patty before, and she's singing this song that means a lot to me, and it certainly means a lot to you and to her. At this thing how that even started the Home by Dark story was because out of sort of a business failure that sort of led to trying to do songwriter shows, and yet, connecting to this song in '94 when I was going to business school, and now I'm on a stage with Patty, with you. I mean, all that stuff is you can't make it up, right?
No.
And then the song itself is so powerful and meaningful. That's another.
Well, and there again, that just gets back to that whole thing of, well, how did you do? I didn't do any of that. I mean, there are things that just take on a life of their own, and that's where they play out. When we first moved to Nashville, I mean, she was just starting to break. She did a great Dallas. Oh gosh, now I'm going to draw a blank on his name. Dallas Frazier. If My Heart Had Windows. I mean, that was like her first big hit, and I went, golly Moses, what a voice! Yeah. And I've always said, that she could sing anything and it'd be great, and to have someone you have that much respect for, that you've known and you've listened to her records and the stuff she and Emery did, How Can I Help You Say Goodbye and things like that, and you hear that and you go, and then have her do a song, and then she wound up doing a lot of other songs after Here I Am, and. I just think the world of her. I always will. And she's now a Georgia girl,
That's right.
She lives in Dallas.
And didn't she, if I got the story right, didn't she ask you when the song had been a hit, didn't she ask you to come sing with her in concert one time?
She did.
Sing that song?
Well, she was on Epic Records at the time. And Here I Am was huge. And so I got asked by Emery, and not by Emery, but by Doug Johnson, who was helping run Epic Records at the time, to ride over on the bus to see Patty play in Knoxville, Tennessee. She was opening for Vince Gill, and she started her concerts with "Handful of Dust," which
another one of your songs.
And she wound up cutting. So I'm standing backstage, but when they asked me to do this, I rode over on the bus with all these bigwigs, and when we get there, Patty comes up and actually gives me the invitation to come up and sing. I didn't have any idea. And I jokingly, I've told it 1,000 times, I said, man, I'd had just enough beer on the ride over. I thought,
that's a good idea.
Right there, Patty. I knew you were a thinking woman. And so I wound up on stage in front of I don't know how many thousands of people at the Knoxville, Civic Arena. And it was, it was a moment that I lived through. That's about as much as I can say. I'll never forget it. And she later said she wouldn't forget it either. And as proof of that, I've never been asked back to sing with Patty. But
one and done.
One and done. I heard more than enough. I wouldn't want to.
We'll call you.
Yeah, we couldn't top that. So we're going to leave it there. But we've been dear friends over the years. I mean, I think the world of her and Emery, and like I said, getting to know people on a completely different level, and it's been a beautiful thing. And you meet them through songs, I didn't meet them because I went and knocked on their door. It just happened. It just happened to be. I'm sitting here with you. I don't even know. I don't really remember how it all came to pass. You asked me. I got a phone call from you, I think.
No, I met you at the Bluebird.
Oh.
I met you at the Bluebird. I did an early show. You were doing a late show, and we have a mutual friend, Jesse Terry, that knew you. And
that's right.
Jesse said, because I certainly heard you and knew of you, but Jesse said he's a great guy. Go talk to him. And so, asked you to come down to Alpharetta area and come play a show with us, a couple shows, and without hesitation. I'll never forget it because you could have easily said no. I mean, especially not knowing me and not knowing what we do with our live show. You could have easily said, but you quickly said, yeah, just tell me when and I'll be there. And I'll never forget that, Tony, and it's so meaningful.
Nah.
Because in part, you gave us credibility on many levels, and the reason I love this, what we're doing now with the Song Can Change Your Life, is songs are so powerful in that they give us a sense of place, a sense of history, and then a sense of relationships that we have with people. And so here I am. When I hear this song, I can hear it now. Whether you sing it or Patty sings it, I'm transported to when I first heard it, going to grad school, and I'm transported to that evening in Alpharetta, Georgia, and hearing Patty 5 feet from me, and me and you sit next to each other, hearing that song. I'm so grateful. I mean, I'm just so grateful.
Well, likewise, Jimmy, and it is most aptly said that a song can change your life. I mean, I remember riding shotgun in a van full of equipment with a bunch of other guys, and riding back from Hilton Head to Savannah. And a dear friend, bass player, great songwriter, Timmy Burke, putting in an 8-track cassette. Now I'm really dating myself, but it was an 8-track
Sure, I know.
of Luxury Liner. And it was, Emmylou's first big breakout record. And so I fell in love with her immediately upon hearing that. And then you fast forward and seeing one of the last shows Jamie and I went to before we moved to Nashville was her at a place called Stonehenge in Savannah with the Hot Band. And we were the first people through the door. I was just all in on Emmy. And the bass player was Emery Gordy.
Wow.
And, who all those years later you would come to know on a completely different level.
Yeah.
And to have had songs recorded by, over the years, to have had Emmylou do some songs.
Yep.
And then add to that, Luxury Liner is known, that's like the barn burner of barn burners, and it's Albert Lee playing the electric guitar. And then in years later, Patty did a song called "You Don't Even Know Who I." Excuse me, that's somebody else. I wish I'd have written that one. Nobody Here by That Name, and it's a song I wrote with Pete Wasner, and Albert Lee plays the guitar. So you talk about a song changing your life. I mean, I can't hear Luxury Liner that I'm not transported back to that, and can't hear if my heart had windows. And the best part about songs, to me, Jimmy, is that you go, all right, hell, man, what are there, 12 notes? There's 26 letters. We got to run out at some point. We're going to have to hit the end of this trail. You never do. And to this day, I'll turn on the radio and I'll go, man, that was low-hanging fruit. Surely I could have seen that one.
Right.
But you didn't. But
Right.
somebody else did.
Yeah.
And they got it, and they got all of it. And they put it out there for you to enjoy. And I hear them every day. And I guess that's been one of the hardest things of all. I was telling somebody the other day, I said, I don't know if Don McLean knew how prescient he was. You know, it feels like the day the music died. I mean, it's like, mid-March last year,
Mm-hmm.
just everything ended.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been music that has sustained me through,
Sure.
this whole affair. And you hit the nail on the head. It marks everything. It marks you in time as to where you were and what you were when you heard that song.
Yeah.
One of the last shows I went to in October was Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden, and our early days as a married, as newlyweds, and to be, the stranger never came off the turntable at our little apartment, and hearing that, and then sitting in Madison Square Garden with that same gal, and hearing, scenes from an Italian restaurant. I mean, if I'd have died right then, which I almost did trying to get to the bathroom, later on,
It almost seems impossible, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. I mean,
with
you
with
can't.
the billions of people on the planet, with that these connections happen. Ultimately, life, someone told me, is simply about people and relationships. But some of this glue that connects us is songs.
Oh,
And it's such a powerful thing. And you have written some of those songs that have done that for me. And so getting to do this today has been such an honor.
Oh,
I'm so
Jim.
grateful to you and your friendship. And I agree with you. My friendship with you supersedes everything else. It's about the relationship. And so thank you for making the trek to Alpharetta. Thank you for writing so many of these songs that have impacted me, for songs that have changed my life, and especially here I am today. And I love you, Tony Arata, and I'm grateful for you. And thank
Jimmy,
you so
like I
much.
said, I'll end the way I started. I knocked on the door back there, and a friend answered it.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. And I love you too, my friend.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you so much for having me. Don't do it, darling. Don't you dare look in there. You said you didn't want to see me, but you've been looking for me everywhere. You know that you're gonna find me if you keep on drinking fast. 'Cause honey, I'm right there waiting on you at the bottom of your glass. And here I am. Here I am. I'm in the bourbon and the water that burn you just like a brand. Here I am. It ain't working, my darling, 'cause as hard as you may try, you keep hearing those words you told me in every man's goodbye. You know that you're just one step from another one being gone. I know I've seen them all unravel, 'cause I've been watching you all along. And here I am. Here I am. I'm in every lie you're hearing that burn you just like a brand. Here I am. Darling, I got over you passing me over a long, long time ago. But my pride was stronger when I was younger. Now I would rather have you know that Here I am. Here I am. And I still carry that flame for you. And it's burning me like a brand. Here I am. Hey.